This is Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
If you bump into Michael Bloomberg, don't worry, you don't need to witness to him. He's earned his way to heaven. Boing. This is Wretched Radio. Shocking. Michael Bloomberg, who's spending some dough. I'm seeing a lot of his commercials talking about issues and then talking about the state of his soul. He was talking about smoking in New York, anti-obesity pushes. You know, he was the fellow who didn't want you to have a soda that was this big, etc. Crackdowns on private gun ownership. To the New York Times, he said, quote, "I'm telling you, if there is a God," there is, sir, "when I get to heaven, I'm not stopping to be interviewed. I'm heading straight in. I've earned my place in heaven. It's not even close." Oh. How many people have their theology based on cartoons? How many times have we seen the cartoon where they get hit with an anvil on the head, their spirit goes up, they're a cat, they're a chicken, they're the fox, whatever, and their spirit goes up. There they have to enter the pearly gates where Peter stands with a clipboard to do an interview why they should be led into heaven, based on their works. We are a culture that seems to buy that narrative, and Michael Bloomberg is no exception. He thinks you got to do good to get into heaven, and he certainly has done enough because, well, he's Michael Bloomberg, and he's tried to help people to not drink too many sodas, to not bear firearms, and not to smoke cigarettes. So that's earned his way into heaven. Wow. Oh, man, Scylla. That's just absolutely chutzpah. He's Jewish, so I presume he can have chutzpah because he's Jewish, if I'm not mistaken. In the meantime, the Pope denouncing rigidity, that we shouldn't be witnessing to people. Gulp and double gulp. By the way, saw a, was it on Netflix? I don't know what it was. One of those cable channels. It was called The Two Popes. And I have to tell you something. It was absolutely fascinating to me for a number of reasons. Number one, it appeared to be pretty accurate. Second of all, it was really good acting. It was Anthony Hopkins. Oh, and I can't think of the other fella. He's not as famous, but you've seen him. He's a character actor. It was just two older actors acting a lot. A ton of dialogue, not a lot of movement. There were no explosions. There were no sex scenes. It was just two old actors talking to each other. This was the Pope. What was his name?
Jonathan Pryce.
You know, you've seen him in a million things. So this was the Pope that followed John Paul II, the German Pope. And he was a conservative Pope. Jonathan Rhys playing the Pope who is in office right now. And so the German Pope, what was the German Pope's name?
Carol?
Right, no.
John Paul II?
Sure, no.
Benedict.
Pope Benedict. He's the conservative Catholic guy from Germany. And he wins. The white smoke comes out because he's unanimously voted in. But one of the fellows who was close to him was a fellow from Argentina, and he is the current Pope, Francis. And Francis then goes back to Argentina after losing to Benedict. He goes back to Argentina, and he now wants to retire. And so this show on Netflix shows him coming to the Pope to get the Pope's permission to retire because the Pope needs to sign off on it, and the Pope doesn't want to sign off on it for various reasons, including he didn't want to show disunity, that he's being too heavy-handed. And as this show progresses, that ultimately he thinks, I don't know if this is accurate or not, that it is now time for the progressive from Argentina to become the Pope. And it shows how progressive this current Pope is. And if it is even remotely accurate, is the Pope Catholic? Well, a lot of Catholics are actually wondering that question. It showed him. I'm just telling you what this Netflix special called The Two Popes. It's been nominated for awards. If it's accurate, just full-blown Marxist. That's how I'm just telling you, if you're Catholic, don't be annoyed with me. I'm just telling you, that's what the movie showed. Just full-blown Marxist, pro-homosexual. In fact, there was a scene that was fascinating where Pope Benedict was mocking him for being misquoted in the paper. You're always misquoted. Here's what you should do. You should say the wrong thing, then they'll quote you with having the right position. Whoa, pretty scathing. Now, while you might kind of applaud that, I think the movie was designed to demonstrate how wonderful this new sensitive, caring, progressive pope is and how curmudgeonly and crabby that conservative pope was. So it was more about being progressive and cheering him for his Marxism, his stance on homosexuality, marriage. He's the nicer of the two. The Pope denounces rigidity as he warns of decline. Quote, I'm translating this from Latin for you. Today, we are no longer the only ones that produce culture. No longer the first, nor the most listened to. Don't think I would argue with that, Francis went on to say. The faith in Europe and in much of the West is no longer an obvious presumption, but is often denied, derided, marginalized, and ridiculed. As a result, he urged the Catholic hierarchy to embrace the necessary pastoral reforms and outlook that will make the church attractive so that it can fulfill its mission to spread the faith. Quote, here we have to be aware of the temptation of assuming a rigid outlook. Rigidity that is born from fear of change and ends up disseminating stakes and obstacles in the ground of the common good, turning it into a minefield of misunderstanding and hatred. In other words, don't be dogmatic, is what the new pope is saying. We can't be the ones being so rigid with our Catholic morality because the world doesn't listen to us anymore, and we are putting ourselves on the sideline of culture. We've relegated ourselves into being simply obsolescent. Rigidity and imbalance fuel one another in a vicious circle. I hope I'm translating this from Latin correctly. And these days, the temptation to rigidity has become so apparent. Tradition, he said, is not static, it's dynamic. That's progressive. That is the Bible conforming itself to the world and not us proclaiming the Bible to the world, demanding that it conform itself to it. And this Pope then saying to try to convert people, you can't be doing that. You shouldn't be doing that. And we shouldn't be dogmatic. That's the new Pope. Nevertheless, the Roman Catholic Church shares the same theology as Michael Bloomberg. You still must earn your way to heaven. Recently, when I was out at the campus of Kennesaw State University and I ran into a Roman Catholic, he was while it was kind of softened up a little bit, the same thread existed, and that is law. Obey the laws, do good, acts of charity, confession, doing the sacraments, last rites, and maybe you'll go to heaven. Now, has the Pope watered that down? I haven't heard anything about that. It's still a work-righteous system. The current Pope, is he a Marxist? I don't know. What's his position on homosexuality? It certainly looks like he's equivocating. These remarks do not encourage anybody to be persuaded that he is anything like the former Pope used to be. By the way, Joey, how old is Anthony Hopkins? He was old, and he was delivering a lot of dialogue, and he was just really, really excellent, if you don't mind me saying so. Again, don't know how close to accurate.
Born in 37, so what's that make him, 83?
Wow. All righty then. All righty. Louisiana Church, Roman Catholic, filled a plane with holy water and blessed a whole community. A Roman Catholic church in Louisiana came up with a novel way to spread the gospel, blessing an entire community by way of a crop duster. I'm not kidding. We can bless more area in a shorter amount of time, said the priest. That's just paganism. Churchgoers brought with them 100 gallons of water loaded into a crop duster. The priest blessed it there. We waited for the pilot to take off, and then they dropped it over the community to drizzle certain parts of the community, including churches, schools, grocery stores, and other community gathering places. Okay. I guess that's one way to bless people. The Pope, in the meantime, says that you should never seek to convert unbelievers. Anyone who proselytizes is not a disciple of Jesus. That's funny. I would say the opposite. If you do not have a passion to see lost sinners saved, you are not saved yourself. Be sure of that, said the Prince of Preachers. The Pope, speaking of having Jewish and Muslim friends, quote, we are all the same, all children of God. Not if you're not in Christ. It didn't occur to me, and it doesn't have to be like saying to a boy or a girl, you are Jewish, you are a Muslim, come, be converted. We're not in the times of the Crusades. In front of an unbeliever, the last thing I have to do is try to convince him. Never. But listen, never, never bring the gospel by proselytizing. If someone says they're a disciple of Jesus and comes to you with proselytism, they are not a disciple of Jesus. Quotes from the Roman Catholic Pontiff. Jesus has another word, go and make disciples. And I'm going to stick with his words. Until tomorrow, go serve your King.